Hi everyone, welcome back to LAB in my new studio. I'm excited, I've had some renovations done, as you know, and one of them is my new LAB wall, so that you can permanently see my social media on the side, you don't have to look it up, so very pleased about that. Today's video is back to normal, I think, because last week I did the diaries every day, which was a bit more informal. I'm going to address the elephant in the room, first of all, for those of you who are watching the diaries, which is that I did not do the final day of the diaries as promised. The reason for that was largely because nothing happened. I worked from home that day. My work from home setup is not sexy like everyone else's. There were no real changes to the law, and I just kind of thought there's nothing much that I can add today that hasn't already been said, and I thought I don't want to end the series on a bit of a boring note. So sorry I didn't do the last day, but it's not because I forgot about you, it's just because genuinely nothing very much of interest happened in terms of the legal landscape. Obviously all the bars and pubs shut, and that was a pretty big change from a social point of view, but from a legal point of view everything was much the same. If you haven't caught up with the diaries, please do, because it isn't just me sitting around talking about my day, it's also hopefully quite informative in terms of what's happened in the legal profession over the last week and how things have changed drastically in a 7-day period. So if you haven't caught up with them yet, please do. So this video is a video of two halves, addressing some of the concerns that some of you have raised with me this week about your current training contracts and also the prospects of obtaining a training contract in the future. So those of you who are worried about the future, I am going to come to you second. But first of all, I want to talk about those of you who are currently in your training contracts or about to start in the midst of all this chaos, because this is a totally unprecedented situation and it's not your normal training contract environment. And those of you who are training at the moment and are now being forced to work remotely are in a really difficult position, and I completely understand that. If you are a trainee, then you know how much support you need from others around you at all times, and perhaps you haven't noticed it until now, how often you ask your supervisor or the person next to you or somebody a question about something. It is more or less constant. Well, it was when I was training anyway. I constantly had questions for people, and now you're kind of launched into this environment where you have nobody, and it's really hard to manage that change and manage your time and structure your workload. So I think now you really have to take control of your own training and not just let it lapse, because we're in a situation where some firms have been excellent and put in place really robust measures to make sure that your training stays on track. But other firms who are perhaps less well equipped to deal with this remote working situation, some of the trainees I'm sure are falling by the wayside because they've got other things to worry about. So if you are in that situation, this is really the time where you've got to be proactive and make sure that you are getting the support that you need, because it's so important that you continue to learn and continue to develop and you continue to get that support from the people around you. So you need to take active steps at this stage to make sure you're putting in daily telephone calls, if necessary, with your supervisor or the person who you're doing work for, to make sure that you continue to be supported and you continue to know what you're doing and what you're supposed to be doing, when your deadlines are and what's being expected of you, because there will be a tendency to forget about you. I'm sorry about that, but in crisis times, often the trainees get forgotten, so you need to make sure that you are not forgotten and you're still being trained properly. Also, make sure that you don't switch into bad habits, because you're now in a situation where you're sitting in your pajamas in your lounge all day long with the telly on in the background, and it can be tempting to feel like you're not actually in a professional environment and therefore don't have to have your professional face on and not adopting the same procedures that you would do if you're in the office. But you need to make sure that you are out of that mindset. If it helps you to get up, put on work clothes, put on some makeup and sit at your desk as you would normally, then do that, because what you don't want to do is slip into this kind of casual style of responding to emails or doing things that you wouldn't normally do without permission. Like, it can be tempting to just ping off that email without getting it checked, or just pick up the phone to a client and give them an off-the-cuff bit of advice without checking that with your supervisor. And it can be so easy to do that when you're working remotely in a casual environment, but you can't do that, especially in a situation like this where everybody's in crisis. It's so easy for slip-ups to be made, but they come back to bite you later on. You're still still in your work environment, you're still operating in a professional capacity, and more importantly, you can still get caught by the rules for whatever you do, even if you're doing it from home. So it's really important that you do whatever you need to do to keep in that same mindset that you would be if you were sitting at your desk, and not make slip-ups and errors because you're in a casual environment. So those are my tips for people who are currently training, and the same if you're about to start your training contract. Things are going to be very different for you than had you started your training contract not in this time period. And again, it's really up to you to be proactive. Put calls in people's diaries, schedule them in once or twice a day if you need to. People won't mind, they just need to be reminded of it because you're not sat next to them all day. So be proactive, make sure you're not sitting at home with nothing to do or worried because you don't know how to handle the situation or what you're supposed to be doing, or you haven't got enough supervision. Just make sure you are making yourself known and being proactive about your training. For those of you who are applying for training contracts at the moment and are understandably concerned that perhaps there won't be as many places available because recruitment is going to scale down in light of the crisis, the honest answer is that it's too early to say whether that's going to be the case. From my understanding is that nothing has changed at the moment. It's too early really for firms to know how their recruitment patterns might be impacted by this. Most firms seem to have not made any changes at the moment, but we're in such early days of this crisis, and I do think the knock-on effects are definitely still to be felt. But because nothing is changing at the moment, I would say to you that there's no reason for you to change your trajectory. If you're planning on applying for training contracts this summer, go ahead. If you're planning on doing work experience, go ahead. Don't put your career plans on hold because of this, because we simply don't know. And if and when I found out any information that might make me change that advice, then I will tell you. In the meantime, this is an amazing time actually to upskill yourself. Despite the fact we're in the midst of a national crisis, what we do now have is an abundance of something that we've been craving for a long time, which is time. We now have so much more time to do all of those things that we've always said, oh, I'd love to do that, but I don't have time to do it. Well, now you do have time to do it, and you've got to use that time wisely. I know at the moment it's a really scary period, and you're fully entitled to have a few days where you just have a bit of a meltdown. The world, as we know it, has been completely turned upside down, and it's okay not to be okay about that. But give it a few days and then snap out of that, because this isn't a short-term thing. This is going to be lasting for a fairly decent amount of time, and you have to take some positives from it, or at least adapt your schedule to make sure that you are now making the most of this newfound time that you have available, where you were previously socialising or going to work or whatever it is that you were doing before. So all the things that you always wanted to do them, and do them right now. A few examples of things which would be great to add to your CV for the purposes of applying for training contracts or legal jobs later on. Learn a language, learn 2 languages. There are loads of online courses that you can do, like coding courses or digital marketing courses. I'm going to link a whole load of stuff in the description below, which are ideas and examples of things that you could do to upskill yourself during this period where we've now got lots of time. So a lot of these, I'm going to say, I did steal off a post that Harry Clark made on LinkedIn last week, which I thought was excellent. So credit where it's due. A lot of this came from Harry. But nevertheless, I want you guys to have this information as well. I'm also ramping up my online services, so if you need extra help, extra mentoring, careers advice, help with your application, CV reviewing, personal brand building, use of social media, all of that kind of stuff, I am now increasing my offering because I've now got a little bit more time to take on a few more clients. So I'll link all the details of that in the description below. If you do want some more one-on-one, hands-on help, then more than happy to do that, and can do that now. In other news, I've got my 2-way Instagram live session with Theodora Hand on Monday. She's a junior barrister at St Philip's, and she's going to be talking to us a little bit about the impact of coronavirus on the bar and also her journey to becoming a barrister. So please join me, follow me on Instagram, and join us at 7 PM tomorrow. You can ask as many questions as you like about anything you like. So I look forward to seeing you then. Otherwise, guys, I will see you next week. I hope this has been helpful. Bye.